Welcome back, everybody, to What Do You Know with Nick and Devin. I am Devin.
And I'm Nick.
Thanks for being here. A little remix. Here.
Yeah, exactly.
Nick, I have a question for you.
Ease.
Was there ever a time that you were in an argument or a fight that you got into that you knew was stupid at the time or looked back on and thought it was dumb?
Oh, sure. 100%. Like, in the sense of, like, it was an argument over something dumb, or, like, I guess regardless. Yeah, absolutely.
Both, yeah.
If you asked me in specific, couldn't tell you. But 100%.
I'm sure other people have specifics
right.
for you.
Well, because, like, it's probably either the topic itself was dumb.
Yeah.
Right? And, like, it was just, like, an argument that way. Or, like, I knew I was wrong, but then continued you know what I mean? The argument to just
you already
stick
drew
to
the
your
line in the
guns.
sand.
Right. So both have occurred. I would say that, like, Brian and I more frequently, I wouldn't call them, like, arguments or, like, getting mad,
Sure.
but we'll, like, bicker about, like, stupid things all the time. Like, I forgot, we were going to brunch with some people, and we were debating about the, like, Great Gatsby. We were talking about, like, a line that they had in the movie that I really enjoy, and, like, whether it was in the book or not in the book. And then Brian's pulling up, like, the PDF of the Great Gatsby to find it. Like, yeah, we'll do shit like that. Or, like,
Control F on that.
Right. Last night, like, having a bickering fight about, like, Jesus H. Christ and where that comes from, and, like, Christ is the last name, not the last, like, a lot of stuff like that.
Wow.
Like, little, like, stupid, you know what I mean? Like, doesn't matter at the end of the day, but, like, someone's gotta be right. You know what I mean?
Of course. Absolutely.
Did it hurt when you Googled that and you knew that I was right?
Cool.
Have you? Like, do you have, like, a good, like, spot on, like, that was so dumb? Such a dumb argument.
I mean, yeah, there was probably some things where it was like, that wasn't worth time or energy, but I am so adverse to conflict that it's like, I don't know.
You're just like, I'm fine.
Yeah. Because, like, I don't mind admitting when, like, if it's something I don't know, I don't mind admitting that I'm wrong. I'm like, oh, I don't know, I'll look it up. Like, I'm very humble. But no, there have been things where, like, I've gotten mad about it. I was like, that was kind of stupid. Like, that was such a waste of time and energy. It just wasn't worth it. There were so many other things that we could have been doing with our time. Like, why?
Totally.
So
I will say what I remembered was, because I think about it more in, like, relationship aspect, but I think so when I worked for Starbucks and I had the store at Chicago and Wabash, high incident store for the people, so a lot of things happening in the store, a lot of, like, activity and, like, fights and calling the police and all those things. I think I was just burnt out by this point, right? It was like before I went to the road streak, all of that.
Yeah.
And my DM, I had a new DM, and I just kind of, like, got to run it, right? So, like, the way that I wanted to was good. We were fine. Like, didn't really need oversight, but she was, like, trying to make improvements, like, for the better. I get that.
New
Retrospect,
person,
Sarah was awesome. You know what I mean? But there was, we had inclusion bags, right? And I wanted them on the counter because then you could just, like, quickly grab them. Everything always looked, like, neat and tidy and whatever. And for some reason, my DM wanted them under, like, in the cabinet.
Yeah.
And then I would come, and I had an ASM at the time, and I would come in and I'd be like, where are the inclusions? And she'd be like, they're under the counter. Like, Sarah stopped in earlier. I was like, I told you I want them on the counter. Like, it was just something so dumb and so minuscule. But I think I was just in a moment of just, like, this is my store. Like, all
hands
the
off.
All of these things. Right. And they were just like, and my ASM's like, I was like, on the counter or die. And she's just like, what is happening?
Yikes.
Yeah.
Fair.
It was crazy. Anyway, that's what I just remembered.
Hey, good story.
Thanks.
Well, okay, so the reason why I asked you that question, because it's kind of related to my topic, and I wanted to ask you, because this is a topic that was kind of brought up a couple episodes ago, last month or so, that I wanted to shed some light on. So I wanted to ask you, what do you know about the Falklands War?
Oh. That sounds really familiar. I feel like, did we talk about this like briefly in something else?
Yeah, so there was the episode that we talked about in the beginning of donating blood, and how one of my pre-screen questions is if I'd been to the Falklands during the from 1980 to 1990 something.
Correct, and I was like, that's dumb, and you're like, well, and I was like, and then we said topic for another time. This might be the time.
This is the time.
This is the time.
This is the time, folks. Right here, right now.
Nothing.
Okay.
Other than that.
Perfect. Great.
Other than if you were, you cannot donate blood.
Right.
Is that still today?
Well, I'll get into that later.
Heard.
But here we go. Okay, so the Falkland Wars, described by an Argentine writer, Jorge Luis Borges. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. As, quote, a fight between two bald men over a comb. The Falkland Wars lasted just over 2 months in the spring of 1982.
What? 2 months?
A pointless fight.
Okay.
So the Falkland Islands, for those of you who don't know, are located off the coast of Argentina in South America, about 300 miles east of South America's southern Patagonian coast, or just a bit east of the tip of South America's tail. Like, you know, that little scoop above, just north of Antarctica? There we are.
Got it.
The islands have been under colonial control since its discovery in the 1760s. And I say actual discovery because there weren't even any native folk on the islands at the time.
Oh, wow.
This isn't a story of people coming in and taking over. It was true discovery of these islands.
Okay.
France established a colony in 1764. Well, I'm going to retract myself a little bit.
Oh.
Because there might have been people that have gone there previously and then left when it was discovered. As far as we know, there weren't any people there.
Sure.
Just wanted to put that out there.
Right. There were no native folk to the islands.
Yes.
Got it.
So France established the colony in 1764. In 1765, a British captain said, I'll take that for Britain. He did. And then in 1770, the Spanish came with a couple of ships and over 1,000 soldiers to kick the British out. This actually caused both kingdoms to go to war over the island, or I'm sorry, this almost caused a war to break out between the two countries over these islands. But something going on around 1774 caused the British governments to withdraw a majority of its presence from overseas settlements. Don't know what was going on.
Weird.
What was leading up to some big conflict, maybe.
Right.
Who knows?
Interesting.
It's a long time ago.
But also how crazy over a couple of islands.
Yeah.
Not a whole chunk of land. Some islands.
They're pretty small islands too.
Yeah.
It's not massive. So
Weird.
Here we are.
Yeah.
So then in 1811, Spain withdrew its garrison from the islands due to the Argentine War of Independence and the Peninsular War fought in the Iberian Peninsula. So there was an Argentine War of Independence that was getting Argentina their independence, and then there was stuff going on in Europe,
right?
Iberia, that area, that Spain had to take care of. So let's
fighting on
pull
both
everyone.
fronts.
Yeah, let's pull everyone back, take care of our business.
Sure.
So then, some guy named Louis Vernet attempted to establish ownership of the islands in 1826. He just rolled up and he's like, "This is me now. This is mine."
And you're like, what?
And he actually got support from both the Argentine and British governments. They're like, "Sure, go ahead."
Yeah.
But this guy claiming ownership of the islands kind of throws a wrench in later sovereignty disputes. People are like, oh, but he still has ownership of it, and they're like, no. We're ignoring this asshole.
We're ignoring this asshole.
Because most of his settlers that he brought over there pieced out in 1831 after a raid had been done by the USS Lexington. Our ship went down there, raided the place, and was like, haha. Got him. Yeah.
What was this? 18 what again?
The raid happened in 1831.
31, okay.
So then there was an attempt at forming a penal colony by Argentina in 1832, but failed due to a mutiny. And then in 1833, the British came back and were like, oh, yeah, this place.
Right.
Takes over the islands and have held sovereignty over the islands since.
Oh, okay.
That is until they were contested 150 years later.
I'm guessing this is where we get into
The Falkland War.
If you will.
Yeah. Now, I do want to clarify something real quick. I call this this event a war. Everyone calls it a war, but no one officially declared war on each other.
Sure.
They declared the area a war zone around and on the island, but never declared war itself officially.
Got it. Okay.
I think it's like technically called a conflict rather than a war.
Sure.
Like when you don't declare war on someone, you call it a conflict.
Yeah.
But like I said, it was never a war.
Sure.
Capital W.
Like, isn't it technically the Vietnam conflict?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And this conflict was also over some nearby islands as well. It wasn't just the Falkland Islands. There's like Thule and the Sandwich Islands. There's just a bunch of small islands that kind of dot that area.
Okay.
Off of Argentina, that this is all kind of encapsulated under. But we just put it under the umbrella of the Falkland War.
Sure. Okay. Reminds me of, remember when we did the episode on the pastry wars? Off the coast.
Oh, the pastry? Yes.
Yeah, Mexico. Like, that's what this reminds me of, like a 2-month war.
Yeah, it's bullshit.
Yeah.
So, a couple of things lead up to this specific conflict. As with all wars and conflicts, you got some stuff to lead up to it.
Naturally.
There were talks between the UK and Argentina not going so well. And then there was also a change of power going on in Argentina. So let's talk about the diplomacy first.
Yeah.
So in 1965, the UN was like, hey, gang, let's figure out this whole like sovereignty thing over these islands. It's pretty messy. We're trying to figure some shit out.
Totally.
Let's wrap this up. And so the UK Foreign and Commonwealth Office, the FCO, thought this wasn't a bad idea. It's like, we should. The islands are kind of messing with UK trade in South America. So they were like, I'm ready to give up these islands. Let's be done with this.
Yeah.
However, not everyone was on board with this idea. Some people in Parliament in the UK blocked the movements made by the FCO. So they were putting things into motion just to like fuck with the whole procedure of getting rid of the islands.
Okay.
And then the islanders, who at this point, it's been 150 years that the British have been maintaining sovereignty over these islands.
Yeah.
So at this point, the islands are mostly descendants of British colonists. They're all British, essentially. And they refused to admit Argentina's sovereignty. And Argentina refused to give up the islands. Like Argentina was like, no, these islands are definitely going to be ours. Like, these should be ours. They're off our coast. Like, the British doesn't have any right to rule over this. But the islanders were like, no, we're British.
And, okay, yeah, that's complicated. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, like you said, there's no native population to the islands.
Right.
Yes, from like a geographical standpoint, it would make sense for Argentina to have sovereignty over the islands, but
because it's only 300 miles away,
right?
Very close.
Like, I can pretty much do that. But if your now native kind of population to the island is British and of British descent, then I guess okay, that's tricky.
Yeah, like I'm sure there has been like a lot of marriages and families of different descents happening. But for all intents and purposes, it's British descendants. Yeah. So like it's kind of, again, that whole sovereignty issue and like who wants to, where do they want to admit their like ruler is?
Yeah.
Kind of.
Well, and also like if the British are maintaining the islands,
right,
then it's fine. You know what I mean? Like if they were like they're leaving it, whatever. Right, exactly. So like I don't understand. Yeah.
So by 1971, the FCO, the UK FCO, was getting frustrated by all of this stuff kind of blocking their moves.
Sure.
And so they got so frustrated, they hoped to convince the islanders that being under Argentine rule wouldn't be so bad. I was like, why don't you try this out for a little bit?
Okay.
So they wanted to give him an idea of how it would feel to be more dependent on Argentina.
Okay. We'll try one.
So the FCO severed the airline with Britain and established one with Argentina. So this kind of got really messy. This was like the planes, the supply line got cut off essentially.
Okay.
And in order to reestablish it took quite a long time.
Got it. Okay.
And the supplies coming from Argentina weren't as readily available, weren't as good as if it were coming from Britain.
Got it. Okay.
And then the FCO also gave an Argentine oil company a monopoly over the islands. So like this whole oil company was just like, great, we'll run our business here.
Yeah.
So that kind of all didn't go so great.
Sure.
And then from there, we're going to jump forward to 1977, when James Callaghan, Prime Minister of Britain at the time, begins to kind of start worrying about this Argentina occupation of Southern Thule, one of those nearby islands I talked about earlier. And he was worried about the occupation and then like as well as some other bullshit that was going on at the time.
Okay.
So James does like the only sensible thing and secretly sends 2 frigates and a nuclear-powered sub to the Falkland Islands to prevent an Argentine invasion of the Falkland Islands.
What the over islands? Like I just don't understand. Like,
right.
And it's not something where I feel like it's like the Panama Canal. You know what I mean? Like, who needs these islands?
Right. You're not a lot of resources are coming out of these islands. Maybe
Right.
some oil, which is why the oil company was there. But like, it's not gold, not
Right.
shipping, nothing. Like, there's nothing coming out of this. So James sends the frigates and the nuclear-powered sub. This is known as Operation Journeyman and was only declassified in 2005. So It is speculated that like the Argentine government didn't even know this was happening.
Yeah.
But Britain's like, no, we sent word that we were sending this over. Like, blah,
Okay.
blah, blah. Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. And what's a frigate?
It's a type of warship,
Oh, okay.
battleship.
Okay.
It's not as it's a class of warship.
Got it.
There's like you have destroyers, frigates, carriers, aircraft carriers,
Sure.
kind of whatnot.
Okay.
It just all kind of depends on your size, your your firepower,
Your capabilities, all that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then we skip to 1980. This is all still under the diplomacy umbrella.
Okay.
So skip to 1980. Some bozo, Nicholas Ridley, the UK Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, so maybe not actually a bozo. I don't really know anything about his policies. Nice. He just came up with this idea to do a leaseback. He was like, let's just do a leaseback for these people, which didn't go over too well either. Now, a leaseback is essentially like you buy the property and then you lease it back to...
Sure.
So, like, you would buy the property of the islands and lease it to Argentina.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So then you can get money. And everyone was like, that's fucking stupid.
But also, you already have ownership of the island, so you don't need to buy it. Who are you purchasing it from?
I don't know. That's why I called him a bozo.
What a maroon.
Exactly. So that was the failed diplomacy.
Okay.
Now we're going to talk about the Argentina change of power.
Okay.
So we're going to talk about the Argentine junta.
Okay.
Junta.
Uh-huh.
It's a Spanish word.
Thank you.
So in 1981, we're in 81. Argentina gets a new junta, which is a government led by a committee of military leaders. Specifically, like a military junta. Like a junta is just like a committee, essentially.
Got it. Okay.
So tensions are high, as they always are with military governments, especially when you're changing powers in a military government.
Correct.
It's not fun. So during this period, Argentina's economy was kind of shit. Again, typical of military governments during transfers of power.
Right.
So because of the economy and this change of power, there was also a lot of civil unrest going on, opposing this military junta.
Got it.
That has been in control since 1976. No one's really happy. This is kind of a recent thing going on.
Yeah.
Not great. So this new gang of military leaders thought of a new solution to resolve this ongoing issue of sovereignty. Military action, to no one's surprise.
Shocking.
Right. So they were like, let's just send in the boys.
We'll do what we do best.
Exactly. Yeah. And so they thought of this to not only solve the sovereignty issue, but also use it as a distraction to divert public attention away from the economic issues, human rights violations going on.
Country just falling apart. Got it.
Right. Human rights violations going on, and then hopefully highlighting the patriotic feelings most Argentinians had towards the islands.
Interesting take.
Yeah, it's a military government.
Right. It's just cover-ups and aggression.
Essentially. So on March 19th, a group of Argentine scrap metal merchants raised the flag on South Georgia Island, and this was later seen as the first offensive act of the conflict.
Sure. Excuse me.
Right.
Conflict. Uh-huh.
So the UK Royal Navy patrol of 2 frigates and nuclear submarine that were already down there were dispatched on March 25th in response. Essentially, they were sent to that island, be like, cut it out. Hey, stop it.
Hey. Crazy that it was a nuclear sub, too.
It was kind of the new technology of the time.
Sure. So everyone's excited.
Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to shoot a nuclear missile. It is nuclear power.
Sure. Okay.
Which means like it's stealthy. Nuclear subs are quiet.
Got it. Okay.
And so Argentina, expecting British reinforcements to eventually show up, because like obviously we did military action, there's going to be a military reaction.
Right.
Ordered the invasion of the Falkland Islands to take place on April 2nd, 1982.
Crazy.
So we have Argentina invading the islands, and the small garrison of British troops stationed at Port Stanley, which I believe is the capital of those islands, were quickly overwhelmed by the Argentine invasion force.
Totally. There couldn't have been that many
right.
people stationed on that small island, right?
So once the invasion force swept through, they were able to control the island, and by the end of the month, Argentina had over 10,000 troops stationed on the Falklands.
What?
Most of those weren't well trained. They were just like kind of rushed in conscripts to fill the ranks, and they were ill-prepared for the upcoming winter. They were lacking supplies of food, proper clothes, and shelter and whatnot.
Yeah.
Because the islands aren't super built up either.
Sure.
It's not like you're going to like the Bahamas or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
But the one thing that the junta predicted was that this invasion would build a sense of like pride, national pride, and that one thing that they predicted actually came true. People loved the invasion. They showed support for the military action by gathering in front of the president's palace and be like, good job, go team. Yeah, which is the exact reaction that the junta wanted.
Sure. It just feels weird. I just
don't
know if it's like we don't have a lot, so like this means a lot, but like I don't get it. Like are they traveling to the island a lot? Like is it a big destination point for Argentinians? Like I'm just trying to understand the why. But you know what? You want to celebrate something? Go for it.
Go off.
You be happy about it, Get those islands.
Yeah. So the Argentine people loved the invasion, like I said. The British government hated the invasion.
Wild.
Who'd have thought?
Which, were there any, and you might get into this, but were there any like civilian casualties during the invasion or anything like
that?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it was like a full scale sort of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if it was during the initial invasion by the Argentine forces.
Got it.
Or at some point during the conflict, there were some island casualties.
Got it. Okay.
Not that many, but still.
Yeah.
So British government hates the invasion. Another 1980s bastard, Margaret Thatcher, was the Prime Minister of the UK.
Oh, Maggie.
Yeah.
Oh, Maggie.
She was Prime Minister of the UK at the time and declared the 200 miles surrounding the Falklands a war zone.
Oh, God. Okay.
So she assembled and quickly dispatched a naval task force to respond to the invasion, which this task force included 2 aircraft carriers and 2 cruise ships repurposed as troop carriers.
Oh, my God. Could you imagine, like, calling up Carnival? Being like, hey, guys, so super quick.
Yeah, and just like some Marines, like, going down the slide.
I mean, what else are you going to do on the way there? Yeah.
Yeah, so she was able to, like, quickly get all this together and send it over to Falkland. And the April 19th, 1982 Newsweek magazine cover actually had an image of the HMS Hermes, one of the aircraft carriers sent, one of 2, with the headline, "The Empire Strikes Back." Star Wars.
All right, pretty good.
Right.
We'll give him to him. We'll give him to you.
It works. That's clever.
What's the distance between England and the Falklands?
So the distance, to answer your question, it's 8,000 miles.
Got it. Okay.
So plenty of time to ride on the slide.
Plenty of time.
And do the rock wall.
I mean, that's fine. I'm like, what else are you going to do?
So
like,
many
you're not
shows.
Training. Right.
The traveling improv troupe.
Military is like, I have a background in theater. Yeah. Someone's like shaking, like daiquiris in the corner. Yeah.
It's tiki night.
Yay. They're all fucked up by the time they get to the war zone. Yeah.
I don't remember if I get into this later or not, but the handling of this situation actually helped Margaret Thatcher get a second term.
Oh, God.
Yeah, so just to put that out
really
there.
Put that cherry on the cake. Yeah.
Yeah. As expected with this conflict going on, the task force heading out 8,000 miles or whatever, most European countries were in support of the UK's response, while most Latin American governments sympathized with Argentina.
Sure.
Chile was a surprising exception to supporting Argentina. They did not support any of Argentina's actions. There was a dispute going on between the 2 countries over the islands in the Beagle Channel, which made them kind of weary over the Argentine military actions.
Okay.
Which caused Argentina to keep most of its elite forces on the mainland in case of anything happening with Chile.
Interesting. Okay.
Right. So that's why not all of their best and brightest were on the islands. They had those conscripts. Right.
Yeah.
Argentina assumed that the U.S. would remain neutral in this upcoming war.
Sure. We did not.
They were wrong. The U.S. tried to mediate negotiations between the 2, to prevent this escalation, this exact situation, but weren't successful, obviously. So because of that, we gave Britain full access to our arsenal.
Not surprised by that.
Yes, we didn't send any troops or anything like that, but we did send them air-to-air missiles, communications equipment, fuel, and other military supplies.
Okay. What I will say is, it does feel very big guy versus little guy.
100%.
But when you look at the details, it is and it isn't. I'm so frustrated by this conflict. And I'm gonna let you finish, but I'm just you want to spin the story into the British and the U.S. are stepping down on the small guy. South American country, but it's no, asshole. British had ownership over these islands. You invaded,
and it's all just a ploy by the junta.
Correct.
It's all just don't look at these humanitarian violations we're doing.
Right. Ooh. Just wild. Okay. Right. Sorry.
And it's really bad too. I describe in a moment some of the equipment that the Argentine military had, and it's you really should have looked at what you had, and then hearing the U.S. gave all of this equipment to it's not good. A
couple muskets.
So while waiting for the entire task force to travel those 8,000 miles, a smaller British force retook South Georgia Island.
Nice.
During this mission, they also captured one of Argentina's submarines. And
You capture a submarine.
I think you could like disable it and like force it to surface.
It's not like a big net.
That'd be impressive.
That'd be impressive.
So they captured one of Argentina's submarines and later sink it. But the article that I was reading about this capturing of the submarine specifically said, quote, that their submarine was, quote, vintage U.S.-made diesel-electric submarine, which I think is supposed to be like a dig. Be like, it's vintage diesel-electric, like none of that, like nuclear-powered submarine. So I thought that was interesting. And so then on May 2nd, the British continued to mess with the Argentine naval force and sink a cruiser, another class of naval warship, with one of their nuclear-powered submarines.
Nice.
And this one was a little controversial.
Okay.
Since the Argentine cruiser was outside of the declared war zone when it was sunk. But again, the same article called the cruiser obsolete, like, quote, obsolete. So I'm like, what the fuck?
I will say I think it's hysterical. Like, when there is kind of a like second world country or something of that nature that is still like up and coming on technology, a lot of the technology that they have is like our technology, and so
yeah,
I'm like,
it's the hand-me-downs,
right?
It's
I was like,
Big Brother's hand-me-downs.
We're gonna know how to take that down. Like,
right.
You get one troop on that ship, and they're like, I know how to disable this whole thing. Yeah.
And I think it might have been called obsolete because of its like the technology of warships have gone so beyond that.
Yeah,
where it's like this should have been in the scrapyard, but we gave it to someone else.
Right.
So, yeah, so like I said, that cruiser was sunk outside of the declared war zone, which is kind of a no-no. And so this actually caused most of the Argentine Navy to stay in port because they realized that they didn't have naval superiority against, the British, which is wild to think about. So the Argentine Navy stayed in port, providing support through its naval air force, as well as a different submarine.
Okay.
This submarine was a, quote, newer German-made diesel-electric submarine. But this one actually wound up being a bigger threat to Britain than they anticipated. It launched several torpedo attacks on the Navy, none of which succeeded.
Sure.
But it did ruffle a lot of feathers. So
Now, did they acquire the submarine before the conflict, or did Germany support Argentina?
From what I read, all of these supplies were prior to this conflict.
Okay, that makes sense.
It wasn't like someone backing up.
Got it.
Argentina.
I was like, I feel like that would be weird if Germany was like, we'll
right, especially post World War II when they're still trying to chill everything. Right. There's the Berlin Wall still going on.
Yeah, we're like, you take care of your own. All right, you don't need to mess with anything else. Yeah.
So while all of this is happening at sea, we also have some aerial combat going on. Now, most of the Argentine Air Force was made up of several dozen old U.S. and French fighter bombers.
There it is.
Definitely not updated with all the new tech and supplies. They were armed with conventional high explosive bombs. None of the, like I said, high tech stuff like radar for acquiring targets.
Oh my god!
Right.
I'm picturing the double winged propeller plane, like Snoopy as the Red Baron sort of situation.
These were all still fighter jets, but
sure.
Still. Despite their inferior firepower, though, the determination and the skill of the Argentine pilots proved to still be deadly against British air support.
Okay.
And they also had acquired, previously to this conflict, acquired a few French-made attack aircraft with updated tech and weaponry that Argentina recently received, which, while still few in number, they were really effective in combat, still very deadly. So, since the Falklands are 300 miles off the coast.
Yeah.
And the Navy and whatnot had to be at port. The Argentine Air Force were kind of pushing their max of combat radius. So the Falklands were at the extreme edge of the Argentines' aircraft's combat radius.
Got it. Okay.
So this made it so that they could only take one pass at the British task force. So like they couldn't do multiple runs against them. It was just like let's do one bomb, then we have to go back home for fuel and resupply.
Oh my God. That'd be so frustrating.
Yeah, especially because learning that, the British ships just stayed out of range.
Right.
Most of the time. They just kind of scooted back a couple feet. It's like the old Tom and Jerry cartoons where like he measures the rope, draws the line, and then hits the dog tied to the doghouse.
It's exactly where they got this this tactic from.
So the British ships remained out of range most of the time until they needed to close in and attack Argentine positions.
Got it. Okay.
So it was just like a boop boop.
I love that.
So the Brits, so all this is going on. The Brits were also having a few problems of their own.
Sure.
With only 2 aircraft carriers available, the Royal Navy would be devastated if they lost one, since that would most likely mean that they would have to retreat if that happened. So they were super defensive of their carriers. Air cover to protect these carriers was limited to just a few short-range Sea Harrier naval jets armed with air-to-air missiles.
Okay.
Now, Harrier jets if you saw a picture of one, you would be like, oh, okay, I know what that is.
Okay.
It's just the smaller fighter jets that take off from the aircraft carriers to typically support ground forces.
Got it.
They're just the smaller, short-range guys.
Heard.
So in order to kind of stretch that cover to help defend their area, the British stationed a handful of destroyers, class of warship, and frigates, class of warship, in a line ahead of the fleet to provide radar information back to the carriers.
Crazy.
So it's just kind of like a picket fence of radar points.
Yeah.
So while this was useful, not all of these ships were armed with anti-aircraft or anti-missile weapon systems, which left them very vulnerable to attack.
Ooh.
Argentina took advantage of this vulnerability and on May 4th sank the destroyer HMS Sheffield with one of the missiles they got from the French, which I think is kind of poetic. In a historical sense.
Fair. That's actually really funny. But they fully sank the ship, the destroyer?
Yes.
Wow.
And the British lost a few more ships and whatnot more than I expected. Like they lost more than I expected while I was researching them.
You have the entire British Royal Navy.
They only sent like a handful, like a thumbnail's worth.
Dude, and you can't take care of business on this small island? What are we doing?
I don't know. It's the 80s.
See, and this is where I go, yes, our budget shouldn't go to our military. Like all of our budget shouldn't go to our military. However, at least we can like kind of take care of shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The fact that like you're able just to flatten a whole country if you need to.
Right.
I don't know.
Like, no, we shouldn't.
Right.
And we shouldn't have that power. But like, don't fuck with me. Right. It's one of those things.
I carry a big stick.
Thanks, Teddy.
So the Brits did lose that one destroyer, but in the meantime, Argentina lost about 20 to 30% of their planes.
Dang. Okay.
Right.
Bigger hit, yeah.
So now the Argentine defenses are down, which leaves them open for a British amphibious landing.
Ooh, I always think these are fun.
I mean, it's not as cool as like the propaganda military videos where like it's just a guy in a bucket hat coming out of a river. This is more of just like taking a boat to the island.
See, I think of that, and then I also think of like World War II, like D-Day, like where they like more of charge and then like it just drops off the back and they're like go. Yeah. Terrifying.
I know. Anticipating a direct assault
Oh.
from the British, the Argentine ground forces commander decides to beef up defenses around the capital, Stanley, to protect the nearby airstrip. It was vital for them.
Okay.
That's kind of where they were sending all their air forces from.
Sure.
And able to get supplies as well. However, the British Navy Task Force commander and his land force counterpart was decided to switch up the strat a little bit. It was like, let's not go for the capital.
Oh.
We're going to, in order to like avoid casualties of the civilian population as well as their own forces.
Sure.
They were instead going to make their initial landing near Port San Carlos on the northern coast of East Falkland, which is essentially, if you have the island, it's on the exact opposite side of the island. So they just went around.
Okay.
Landed, quickly took over that area, and then later would mount an attack by land on Stanley. They would come up from behind.
That's smart.
Right. So, on May 21st, the British forces land unopposed, but quickly encounter resistance of about 5,000 Argentine defenders at San Carlos.
Okay.
So, while all of this is going on during this land battle of the British making their amphibious attack, to wear the defenders down, those 5,000 people, the Argentine Air Force is still able to attack the British fleet.
Got it.
They're able to sink 2 frigates, a destroyer, a container ship loaded with transport helicopters, and a landing ship disembarking troops.
Okay.
They're also able to damage several other frigates and destroyers, but they're unable to damage the vital aircraft carriers.
Okay.
This counterattack on all those ships cost Argentina a large portion of their remaining jets, helicopters, and light ground attack planes. So it's just kind of like they're losing more than they're destroying, essentially.
Sure. Yeah.
So fighting continues on ground and air, and several long forced marches from the initial amphibious invasion by the British allowed the British forces to eventually take the settlements Darwin and Goose Green, which are kind of south of San Carlos.
Okay.
I know I'm saying a lot of like
You're good.
things. I don't even know where they are.
The map helped. The hand map helped.
The hand map,
yeah.
circle.
Yeah.
And so they're able to take those 2 settlements. And this led to the British taking and occupying the high ground west of Stanley. So they landed west of Stanley on the opposite side, marched south, and then were able to kind of swing back up and encircle Stanley.
Nice. Okay.
Effectively surrounding and blockading the Argentine forces stationed in the capital, because they had their ground forces on the high grounds west of Stanley, and then they had the Navy out on the sea on the port.
So really, you're either going into the water or right into like ground troops.
Right.
Yeah.
So this large garrison of the Argentine forces at the capital was cut off and could be starved out, and they were eventually forced to surrender. They were essentially at a siege around them, like they're fucked. So on June 14th, the Argentine ground forces commander surrendered to the British, ending the conflict. There was like one more thing that happened.
Okay. Nothing crazy.
Right.
Okay.
So
that's how it ended?
That's how it ended.
Okay, like not very climactic.
I'm sure
yes, very well strategized.
When you do the pincer move that's been around.
No one saw coming.
Right.
Not even
exactly.
the pinta. Yeah.
So at the end, both sides suffered some casualties, of course.
Okay, yeah.
The British had 255 killed, 775 wounded, and 107 captured.
Wow.
They also lost 41 various warcraft, ships, jets, etc. Not the video game. 41.
Jeez.
So planes and the 2 helicopters that were blown up are all lumped into there.
Okay.
Argentina, on the other hand, had 649 killed, 1,657 wounded, and 11,313 captured. They also lost 109 various warcraft. Again, not the video game.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's a big hit.
Big
But
difference.
also, what are the British going to do with 11,000? Was it 11,000 captured?
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to do with that?
Well, they don't have to fight them.
But like, do you like, give them back? Like, what do? You travel with them back to England?
No, I mean, in terms of war, you
just kind of say, there you go. Yeah.
I mean, ideally.
And you do that thing where you kind of like push them as they're walking off the ship.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
There were also, unfortunately, 3 Falkland Islanders killed during the conflict from shelling during the invasion.
Okay, but only 3?
Surprisingly.
Like,
I don't know how populous the island is, though. So,
sure.
like, enough to have settlements?
Yeah. I wonder if, like, during the invasion, maybe some of the British, like, actually took people out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, potentially.
Oops.
Yeah. But that's really surprising, only 3. That's really good.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So, war analysts look at this conflict. They look back and see all the papers and whatnot, and see how it illustrated the importance of air superiority, advanced surveillance, and logistics support, which both sides had operated at their maximum ranges.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of interesting things to learn from this.
Sure.
But ultimately, it was kind of a dumb war.
Correct.
So, why did I talk about this 2-month, 1 week, 5-day war? I mean, it's definitely a conflict. Because of my blood donation, like I said.
Yes.
The pre-screening questions that I brought up last month or so. Mm-hmm. So, the questions on my blood donation pre-screen questionnaire are as follows. From 1980 through 1996, did you spend time that adds up to 3 months or more in the United Kingdom countries of England, Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, the Isle of Man, the Channel Islands, Gibraltar, or the Falkland Islands? That's one question.
Okay.
Second question is, quote, from 1980 to the present, did you receive a blood transfusion in France, Ireland, England, Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, the Isle of Man, the Channel Islands, Gibraltar, or the Falkland Islands?
Okay.
End quote. So why are they concerned with all of that?
Yes.
It's the risk of transmitting variant Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, VCJD, or more commonly called mad cow disease. It has nothing to do with the Falkland Island Wars.
What?
It's mad cow disease.
Why are all these people running around with mad cow disease? What's happening?
So like all of this just has to do with folks associated with the UK and the Crown.
Okay.
Because mad cow disease was like running kind of rampant during the time, during those dates that I said, from 1980 to 1996. It was kind of like this big scary thing. It was kind of not, yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Can't they just say, like, have you ever been in contact with mad cow disease?
I think because they need to specify like those
where?
Areas and where, because that would determine like how bad you might have or how readily you came in contact with it. I
just love that question had nothing to do with what that entire topic was on.
Yeah.
But
I was too deep.
It sparked an interest.
Well, yeah, because I in the other episode, I was like, oh, it has to do with the Falkland Wars.
Duh.
Let's talk about the Falkland Wars.
Well, and then you were like, nuclear sub, and I was like, okay.
We got to do
radiation thing.
Right.
And then that didn't happen.
And then Godzilla.
And then
yeah, so this had nothing to do, my blood questionnaire had nothing to do with Falkland Island War. It had to do with mad cow disease, so it looks like I'll have to do an episode about mad cow disease.
Nice. Nice. That's bananas, though. I will say,
yeah.
So do the British still have ownership over the Falkland Islands?
Yeah.
Makes fucking sense.
As of now, it's all still under British sovereignty.
Crazy.
Right. It was pointless. Like the one writer said, the quote at the beginning of this episode, 2 bald men fighting over a comb.
Yeah. That's exactly what it is.
So,
bananas.
That's the Falkland Wars, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. Make sure to like, subscribe, and all that if you haven't already at WDYK_podcast. We post a bunch, and I'd love to see you be there with us on the internet.
Yeah, do it. You won't.
So thanks for listening. Thanks, Nick, for hanging out and talking with me about a topic that I didn't need to talk about.
But we're all the better for it.
Of course.
Yay!
Okay, thanks.
Okay, bye.
Bye.